One word in Magic the Gathering's vast multiverse has the power to, when spoken, curdle the blood and turn the tongue black. One word strikes fear in even the most stalwart of hearts, infiltrates and corrupts even the most pure of souls, and evokes a sense of helplessness in even the most grounded of spirits. This word not only represents a metallic hellscape where slick black oil rains down upon rotting flesh and glistening steel forged in the furnaces of torment and anguish, but it has also come to represent those vile creatures that slink forth from the dark depths, conquer, mutilate, and infect pristine worlds with the twisted image of progressive evolution envisioned by their beloved creator. This word is Phyrexia. Hey lore lovers, my name's Eric and welcome to the Lorebrarians YouTube channel, where we share the lore and stories behind many fantasy settings to strengthen the connection between people and their passions. Today's topic is a study in completion, as we learn about the creation, purpose, and characteristics of the Phyrexians, MTG's ultimate vile spawn. These beings and their god Yawgmoth antagonized Dominaria, Urza Planeswalker, and the greater multiverse for millennia, and in recent years have resurfaced on the metallic plane of Mirrodin hundreds of years after Yawgmoth's defeat as a new Phyrexia that once more threatens the multiverse. In our study, we'll learn of Phyrexia and its modern counterpart as planes, then delve into the hierarchy of each and the creatures that can be found within. If you haven't already, check out the video detailing Yawgmoth, Phyrexia's god and the father of machines, as soon as this video ends to gain a complete perspective of the Phyrexians. And before we begin, I want to give a huge thanks to all of my supporters over on Patreon. Their patronage means the world to me and helps the channel grow and improve. Alright, time to descend through the spheres of sulfuric fumes and putrid oil as we discover the true path towards completion. Let's dive in. Phyrexia and its creatures can be broadly divided into two main camps. That which refers to the original artificial plane of metal, the Thran physician and eugenicist Yawgmoth transformed into his own grand project, and that which refers to the Phyrexia that infected and corrupted the metallic plane of Mirrodin, transforming it into a contemporary new Phyrexia. Many things separate Yawgmoth's Phyrexia from the new, which we will discuss shortly, but there are several facets that act as the foundation of what it means to be Phyrexian, regardless of plane or time. The first is the idea of phyresis and completion. Phyresis is a term coined by Yawgmoth and believed that only through constant evolution, constant improvement, could mortals rise above death and disease. This philosophy is so deeply embedded within Phyrexian philosophy that the plane and its creatures are named after it. We see how deep the indoctrination reaches in the flavor text of Mox Opal, which reads, "What crossed her mind defied orthodoxy. Could there be perfection beyond completion?" Completion is the process of merging metal with flesh, and in time, completely substituting an organic body with one made of steel. Completion is the natural partner to phyresis. An organic body ages, withers, and is vulnerable to disease, while one made of metal stands incorruptible. Phyrexians constantly strive for phyresis, but only a select few are worthy of total completion. The second characteristic that unites Phyrexians is their reliance on glistening oil. This substance is made from oil and powerstone nanites that at once acts as lifeblood for Phyrexians, surging through their veins and metal cables, a contagion used against Phyrexia's enemies to corrupt or kill, and as a weapon of colonization to transform entire planes and bend them to Phyrexia's will. We can see the glistening oil on display in the card that shares its name, as well as in Rain of Filth, which demonstrates how abundant the oil was on Phyrexia. The flavor texts of Loxodon Convert and Phyrexian Hulk grant us insight into how efficiently the oil fulfills its task. They read, "Just one drop of the glistening oil can eventually stain even a soul as stalwart as a Loxodon's beyond redemption." And, "An invasion weapon of ages past, the glistening oil contained the blueprints of countless atrocities." On Phyrexia, glistening oil was used to birth new Phyrexians in large vats, as well as fuel Phyrexian warriors and war machines. On New Phyrexia, the glistening oil corrupted Mirrodin's metal and created mycosynth, a metallic fungal organism that intermingled with both artifice and flesh. It created the foundation for New Phyrexia, which we see in the art and flavor text of Mycosynth Wellspring, which depicts the spreading fungus and states, "The oil created the mycosynth created New Phyrexia." The glistening oil contains the blueprints of Yawgmoth's grand designs, plans for countless Phyrexian atrocities and invasion weapons, the outcome of which depends upon the substrate used. It's an extremely dangerous substance and one deeply tied to Phyrexia. Finally, all Phyrexians are united in their religion, a twisted devotion to their god. The hierarchy and social structure of both old and new Phyrexia are built upon religious devotion. At its center is the Father of Machines. On the original plane of Phyrexia, Yawgmoth assumed the role of god and authoritarian over all of Phyrexia. He engendered a religion that worshipped him as creator and giver of life, master of perfection. His religion was enforced by the vat priests that tended Phyrexian spawning pits and members of Phyrexia's inner circle, the most powerful demons and praetors responsible for guiding Phyrexian government. On New Phyrexia, religion is centered more around the process of completion, what Phyrexians refer to as blessed perfection, rather than a specific godlike father of machines. This is largely due to the emergence of disparate and disunited factions, each centered around their own color of mana. Elesh Norn and the wide-aligned Phyrexians of the Machine Orthodoxy have consolidated power through use of religion and subterfuge. Though the role of steward was briefly held by a corrupted Karn during the events of Scars of Mirrodin, Norn has solidified her role as Yawgmoth's inheritor on New Phyrexia, the Mother of Machines. With their similarities explored, it's now time to delve into the differences between new and old Phyrexia that make each uniquely dangerous. Phyrexia is a plane where the mechanical is married to the biological to create a perverse facsimile of natural life, an ecosystem of death, decay, and reuse. Despite Yawgmoth's long tenure as god of Phyrexia, he merely discovered the plane, he didn't create it. The vision for Phyrexia was realized an unknown time ago by an unknown planeswalker as a perfect artificial paradise. Its master mysteriously died in roughly -5,000 AR, and a short time later the Thran planeswalker Dyfed brought Yawgmoth here under the pretense of charity. It was meant to act as a rehabilitative colony for Thran afflicted with phthisis, a pneumonia-like disease caused by Power Stone radiation. But Yawgmoth envisioned himself a god over a perfect world in which he could carry out the process of progressive evolution, or phyresis. He looked upon the plane and in an instant knew it would be the location of his greatest work. Thus Phyrexia was born. As an artificial plane, Phyrexia needs a constant and intensely powerful stream of concentrated will to prevent planar collapse caused by the relentless entropy of the blind eternities. Phyrexia's creator initially supplied the power, and through Dyfed's ritual, Yawgmoth tethered himself to the plane, assumed the position the recently deceased planeswalker vacated, and became the god of Phyrexia. Phyrexia's brilliance comes from its structure. The artificial plane is organized in a pattern of nested spheres, each smaller and denser than the one within which it's encapsulated. Each sphere has a purpose, and as an artificial plane drawn mostly from colorless mana, Phyrexia is a world almost entirely composed of metal. We'll begin our tour of the plane on its surface, the first sphere. The first sphere is the largest and outermost. In the time of the Thran, it's described as an idyllic paradise, where rolling hills, fertile fields, meandering rivers, and verdant forests bask beneath the warm, soft glow of sunlight, a place that would allow recuperation from disease for rehabilitated Thran. It was populated by plants and small serpents of artificial creation, born in the vats of another sphere, that could in theory act as nourishment. Under Yawgmoth's rule, however, it's been transformed into a grisly parody of natural life. The sun has been blocked by billowing clouds of ash, which pour down putrid, oily rain. A combination of soot and metallic debris dot the rusted landscape. Dragon engines and other artifact creatures lurk in the dense steel forests. It's a realm that all life should avoid. The newest Phyrexian creatures are brought to the first sphere in a bitter trial of survival to see who is worthy of completion. The second sphere is marked by massive metal beams and struts that shoot up to the ceiling and acts as the underbelly of the first sphere. These struts and girders support the first sphere from collapse. Fires from the forges of spheres below act as the only source of light for the second. This location also acts as a massive storage and ammunition depot for Phyrexian armies. Little is known about the third sphere, but during Yawgmoth's rule he outfitted it with a labyrinthine maze of pipes and metal beams, perhaps as a defense against Urza, for they prevent planeswalking to lower levels. Horrors and Phyrexian abominations slink through the darkness of this sphere. Beneath lies the fourth sphere, where much of Phyrexia's population exists in a mockery of natural life. Here, Massive vats of glistening oil are tended by vat priests and acolytes, from which newts, or new Phyrexians, are spawned. Phyrexian warriors in the military class are also trained in the fourth sphere. It acts as the location for experimentation and invention, where Yawgmoth's acolytes devise terrible weapons of plague and war, where artificers create planar portals. Devastating technology that allows interplanar travel and allows Phyrexia's armies to attack other worlds. This far beneath the surface, any semblance of natural atmosphere is lost. Here, clouds of black dominate a gray sky, intermittently illuminated by surges of lightning and the stoked glow of Phyrexian forges. Continuing on our journey brings us to the fifth sphere, which acts as Phyrexia's lifeblood and beating heart. This sphere houses the plane's entire reserve of glistening oil. This vast, slick reservoir is termed the boiling sea. Glistening oil acts as the substrate from which new Phyrexians are born, and also acts as the lifeblood for all Phyrexian creatures of flesh and metal. The fifth sphere is an immensely strategic location. Further below lies the sixth, where fields of waving barbed grass shrivel underneath the constant blaze of a solid white sky. This sphere houses Phyrexia's inner circle, which functions as the governmental body through which Yawgmoth's will is enacted. Here, demons, praetors, and other officials jockey for power and curry favor with their god through subterfuge and manipulation. Each plots to take power from another, and no devious tactic is off limits. As we fall beneath the sixth sphere, we enter the deepest layers of Phyrexia, those that act as foundation to support the greater plane. The seventh sphere is known as the Eternal Furnace, and its fires power the entire plane. Massive forges of molten slag, smokestacks regurgitating plumes of dense soot, and suffocating heat mark this nearly uninhabitable layer. The seventh sphere is also known as the Punishment Sphere. It's where Yawgmoth sends those who failed him to languish in everlasting torment. Metal grinders line the ceiling which crush sinew and steel alike. Small Phyrexian gremlins tend to the seventh sphere forges. The eighth sphere is one of pure energy. Nothing else is known. It likely acts as Phyrexia's source of mana and power. Finally, we reach the ninth sphere, the core of the plane, its soul, and Yawgmoth's inner sanctum. Passing through the other spheres, we were hit with terrible noise, the stench of Phyrexian industry, and a suffocating heat. But here, all is silent. Here, all is dark. Very few have witnessed Phyrexia's ninth sphere. It's terribly dark and cramped, described as large enough only to hold its master, and space enough only to pace. Here, Yawgmoth performed the ritual that tethered his essence to that of Phyrexia. The ninth sphere can be thought of as the plane's soul. For many centuries, Yawgmoth remained dormant here, relying on his inner circle minions to carry out his great plans. From the ninth sphere, all manner of atrocities and abominations were given thought, then sent to the other spheres to be realized. But what kinds of creatures populated this world of metal? Who were the Phyrexians? Phyrexians come in myriad shapes and sizes, pawns to fulfill a particular role within Yawgmoth's perfected world. The first generation of Phyrexians were born from Yawgmoth's genius nearly 10,000 years ago. Brought to his metal paradise under the pretense of rehabilitation, Thran afflicted were experimented on and augmented through progressive evolution to become the first Phyrexians. Their designs and purpose have been improved upon over millennia of phyresis, and although they have very different qualities, most all share grotesque characteristics that mark them as Phyrexian. Eyelessness, sharpened appendages, and rotting flesh wrapped around jutting bones or corded metal. Phyrexians can be divided into categories based on their purpose and their rank in society. It's first worth mentioning the gremlins. These small creatures inhabit the great Phyrexian forges, scavenge scrap metal, and break down older Phyrexian designs. They aren't true members of the Phyrexian hierarchy and aren't given a second thought by others. The gremlins merely provide an industrious and unthinking labor force. All Phyrexians begin their lives as newts, androgynous hairless humanoids birthed from vats of Phyrexian oil. These creatures represent pluripotent stem cells within the greater Phyrexian organism. Through the process of completion, they're transformed into whatever Phyrexia demands, thrust into the role Yawgmoth desires of them. The process of completion is anything but simple. Newts are first grown in vat priest-tended baths of Phyrexian oil in the fourth sphere, then sent to the first upon maturation, or they must compete amongst their fellow broodlings and other Phyrexians to prove their worth. Most don't survive and are consumed by stronger, more powerful Phyrexians. A select group of newts are spared from the atrocities of completion and retain their human-like form to become Yawgmoth's premier interplanar spies known as sleeper agents. Sleepers are deployed through planar portals to infiltrate, surveil, and destabilize other realms, weakening their defenses and preparing them for Phyrexian incursions. We can hear their purpose in the flavor text of Darkest Hour, which reads, Yawgmoth spent eons wrapping Phyrexians in human skin. They are the sleeper agents, and they are everywhere. And we can see how easily they blend with humans in the illustration of Sleeper Agent. So great are the sleepers' secrecy that many of them are ignorant of their own existence as Phyrexians. They go about their lives as unwitting spies, the eyes and ears of Phyrexia. Zancha, confidant and friend to Urza, is perhaps the most well-known Phyrexian sleeper who turned against her master and aided the Planeswalker in his fight against Yawgmoth. Minions occupy the next level of Phyrexian society. They've undergone partial completion with metallic adaptations and appendages jutting out from their flesh. Minions are wide-ranging in appearance and purpose, versatile grunts or ground troops for Phyrexia's armies. They are the expendable will of Yawgmoth. The cards Body Snatcher and Phyrexian Infiltrator show minion assassins and spies, adept at infiltration, while Bone Shredder and Phyrexian Broodlings highlight the various shapes minions assume. Carriers and artificial constructs represent the ingenious innovation of Phyrexia's Vat Priests and Artificers. Carriers are deployed to transmit engineered plagues created by the most brilliant minds. They release terrible disease, spread virulent contagions to cripple opposing forces, and decimate entire regions in mere days. We see them represented in cards like Phyrexian Defiler, Phyrexian Debaser, and the horrible Plague Lord. Though the process of completion merges flesh with metal, Phyrexian armies are supplemented by unthinking mechanical constructs born entirely of artifice. These siege engines and war machines unleash terrible destruction and highlight the innovation of Yawgmoth's underlings. Dragon engines are constructs that were deployed during the Brothers' War between Urza and Mishra, while the mighty Colossus and Hulks were deployed to devastating effects during invasion, where they razed settlements, slaughtering all inhabitants. Their chilling ruthlessness is highlighted in the children's rhyme. It doesn't think, it doesn't feel, it doesn't laugh or cry. All it does from dusk till dawn is make the soldiers die. Perhaps the most terrifying of Yawgmoth's creations are the myriad horrors deployed both within the plane and across the blind eternities. These amalgamations of all things deadly are the pinnacle of Phyrexian predation, able to tear through even the most well-defended fortresses and hardest armor with ease. They're known to lash out against whatever stirs their primal ire, even other Phyrexians, as seen in the flavor text of Phyrexian Gargantua, which reads, Other Phyrexians have nightmares about the Gargantua. The most notable of horrors are the Negators, which were deployed several times across Dominaria in Yawgmoth's millennia-long fight with Urza Planeswalker. The final Phyrexians occupy the peak of Yawgmoth's social structure. They are known as Praetors and Demons. These creatures are completed to metallic perfection, containing little to no flesh and commanding terrible power. Yawgmoth's Praetors and Demons control Phyrexia's inner circle and governmental body. They spend their days steering their own factions and sabotaging another in hopes of gaining prestige in the eyes of their creator. The most notable Inner Circle members were the demon Gix, who acted as Yawgmoth's right hand for thousands of years, and Croag, who acted as Overseer of Wrath, and was tasked with hunting Urza shortly before the events of invasion. With the original Phyrexia explored and its creatures discussed, it's time to shift our focus now to the metal plane of Mirrodin, which has been corrupted beyond recognition, transformed through the Glistening Oil into new Phyrexia. This new breed of Phyrexians has its own creatures, structures, and ideologies to continue the blessed work. New Phyrexia had once been named the Plane of Argentum, a metallic world of mathematical perfection created by Karn Silver Golem shortly after his ascension to Planeswalker status. It was a cold world of steel, a blank canvas onto which Karn could shape his own vision. But Argentum's purity was quickly corrupted as the Silver Golem unwittingly seeded it with droplets of Phyrexian oil that resided within his Phyrexian Heartstone power matrix. Though the Planeswalker was himself immune to and unaware of the contagion's presence, the oil slowly spread in his absence. It corrupted the plane, then latched itself to the Golem Memnarch, whom Karn had created and entrusted to steward Argentum while the Planeswalker was away. The glistening oil ate away at Memnarch's mind and soul, showing him visions of a perfect world ruled by him, not his master, and through which Memnarch could harvest the Planeswalker spark. This world was no longer Argentum. The glistening oil and its first victim Memnarch transformed it into the plane of Mirrodin. Mirrodin shares many similarities with Phyrexia. It's an artificial plane and one based in metal. Like Phyrexia, Mirrodin's structure is that of distinct layers, although it doesn't have 9 spheres but rather 2 simple layers, a core and an outer sphere. After the battle for Mirrodin, the ascendant new Phyrexians are slowly adding layers to transform it into Phyrexia's replica, beginning with the furnace layer. The metallic nature of Mirrodin's environment and foundation acted as the perfect substrate for the glistening oil, rapidly expediting its growth and proliferation. This comes mainly with the creation of mycosynth. This spore-like metallic fungus birthed from glistening oil spread throughout the core and across the outer surface of Mirrodin, transforming flesh to metal and bestowing consciousness upon artifice. In essence, the mycosynth began the first steps of Phyrexian completion. We can see how the mixing of metal with flesh granted Mirrans a resemblance to Phyrexia even before the contagion spread, in the flavor text of Barbed Battle Gear, in which the praetor Urabrask remarks, "One need only look at the inhabitants of this world to see that they are forged halfway to perfection. All they need is a whisper of the glorious word." With Phyrexia's victory over the Mirrans in the Scars of Mirrodin block, the plane is again transformed, this time into a new Phyrexia. So great is the glistening oil's capacity for corruption that the very core and soul of Mirrodin have been bent to Phyrexia's will. This is seen in the cards Phyrexia's Core, in which the Mirran partisan and Planeswalker Koth states, "So, even the heart of our world has succumbed." And in the card Soul of New Phyrexia, an avatar that represents the fundamental nature of a plane beyond salvage or redemption. With the emergence of a new plane comes a new generation of Phyrexians that have retained some characteristics of their ancestors, but have also acquired drastic differences. Unlike Yawgmoth's Phyrexians, who are rooted in colorless and black mana, the Phyrexian conquest of Mirrodin grants new Phyrexia access to all 5 colors. This not only results in the completion of creatures not seen in the original Phyrexia, but it also gives rise to new Phyrexian hierarchy, which is based on 5 separate factions, each tied to a particular color of mana. The Machine Orthodoxy is the white-aligned faction of religious fanatics led by the praetor Elesh Norn. They see complete unity as the purest form of existence, all parts working in harmony to achieve a master goal. So they abhor and persecute any wayward souls or deviant minds. This vision of unity is on display in the flavor text of Marrow Shards, in which Elesh Norn states, "We are a single entity. Dissenters must be sutured into the orthodoxy." The religion of the Machine Orthodoxy has created several scriptures to indoctrinate and fuel religious zeal, which we can read in the tomes and verses present in the flavor text of Gore Vassal and Inquisitor Exarch. Norn's church is a hierarchy where she alone sits at the top as Grand Cenobite, devising plans, pulling strings, and sowing discord amongst the factions that oppose her. Beneath her are lesser Cenobites, which control specific aspects of the church's function. Below them sit the priests whose purpose is to spread religious enlightenment to the benighted, which we can see in the cards Suture Priest and Priests of Norn. The Orthodoxy's religion would lose much of its power if its only weapons were words. The teaching of Norn's priests are supplemented by the cold steel of the Porcelain Legion, the church's metallic men-at-arms. Elesh Norn and her white-aligned faction plot from within the walls of her annex to eventually spread blessed perfection across the blind eternities. Sheoldred, Whispering One, is a black-aligned praetor representing enslavement and corruption. Her vision and methods are most similar to the traditional Phyrexians due to her basis in black mana, power at any cost. She engages in brutal acts of slaughter, weaves webs of lies, and lures with temptations, all to achieve greater power for herself. We see this unfold in cards like Praetor's Grasp. Unabashed pursuit of strength hardly leads to cooperation, and the black-aligned faction of New Phyrexians is itself split into 7 smaller parties, known as the 7 Steel Thanes, each unwilling to give up their share of control. The Thanes engage themselves in a bloody war of succession to determine who is worthy of taking up Yawgmoth's mantle as the new Father of Machines. The remaining 6 Thanes are as follows: Cranox, the Deep Thane, who envisions a sphere entirely made of glistening oil, similar to Phyrexia's 4th sphere. Roxith, Thane of Rot, who sculpts and carves the medium of flesh and wishes to add a sphere made entirely of it. Geth, Lord of the Vault, who turned against the Mirrans and joined Phyrexia early in the war to cement his position of power. Azax Azog, the demon Thane who presides over aspects of fear and hopelessness. The vampiric Vran, Thane of Blood, and Thrysix, the writhing Thane, who believes in an everlasting cycle of life and death. The black-aligned Phyrexians under Sheoldred's rule most traditionally represent those of old Phyrexia in appearance, and in purpose they are deeply tied to spreading affliction. Many black Phyrexians have the keyword infect, distribute -1/1 counters, or otherwise represent disease and decay, which we can see in cards like Reaper of Sheoldred, Phyrexian Vatmother, and Plague Stinger. All of this to spread blessed perfection. Black-aligned Phyrexians flay flesh, weave it with metal, and sculpt it into a completed masterpiece. We see the brilliant work of new Phyrexia on display in the card Phyrexian Obliterator, in which they have improved upon the negator designs of old Phyrexia to create a truly horrifying weapon. Next are the green-aligned Phyrexians of the Vicious Swarm under the Praetor Vorinclex's rule. Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, is the manifestation of predation and the natural law of survival. A hulking creature that overwhelms with sheer strength, believes that only those most fit are worthy of completion, and that it's the purpose of lesser beings to be cut down and used by the strong, which we can read in the flavor text of Leeching Bite. A substantial portion of Vorinclex's forces became fuel for the rest. At first glance, one would assume the artifice of Phyrexia would be incompatible with the natural force that green mana represents, but green-aligned Phyrexians perfectly exemplify Phyresis and eugenics. Progressive evolution that is thrust into nature's hands rather than vat priests and artificers. The flavor text of Beast Within beautifully captures this sentiment. Kill the weak so that they can't drag the strong down to their level. This is true compassion. The Vicious Swarm has no structure, no law besides the natural order. It's an unthinking, instinct-driven collection of the most powerful, most feared creatures in all Phyrexia that prey upon another and dominate the field with pure show of strength. Only in this natural state can Phyrexia truly evolve. The swarm's hulking monstrosities are depicted in cards like Quilled Slagworm and Phyrexian Hydra, and their values showcased in the flavor text of unnatural predation. Domination by the strongest, that is all that matters in the Tangle now. New Phyrexia's fourth faction is the blue-aligned progress engine, organized and orchestrated by the inscrutable Jin Gitaxias. The core augur is the praetor of experimentation, knowledge, and intelligence, who believes that only through understanding can perfection be realized. The progress engine is filled with splicers and artificers who continually experiment on Phyrexian designs, discard or destroy weak, outdated models, and perfect completed monstrosities. We can see their taste for experimentation in cards like Vidalcan Anatomist and the flavor text of Vapor Snag, which reads, "This creature is inadequate. Send it to the splicers for innovation." But an alignment towards blue mana creates a desire for knowledge beyond innovation. The progress engine also seeks enlightenment through surveillance and the gathering of intelligence from their enemies. Jin Gitaxias' designs were used to plumb the minds of Mirran partisans to learn their secrets during the Battle of New Phyrexia. Their predilection towards mental mastery is seen in cards like Gitaxian Probe and Mind Culling. The final Phyrexian faction is also the most curious. Aligned with red mana and stewarded by Urabrask the Hidden, the Quiet Furnace represents the liberating aspects of emotion, creativity, and temerity. As the praetor of development and industry, Urabrask created the furnace layer of New Phyrexia, from where his underlings tend forges, cast metals, and perfect Phyrexian constructs. Their metallic ingenuity is on display in cards like Molten Steel Dragon and Razor Swine. Red mana's tendency towards passion and creativity imbues Urabrask and his servitors a sense of individuality, a sense of empathy and desire, dangerous traits to possess as members of the rigid, hive-minded Phyrexians. We hear this in the flavor text of Priest of Urabrask, which states, "Even in New Phyrexia, red mana sparks glimmers of individualism, passion, and freedom." Their ability to sympathize with the Mirran partisans led Urabrask to tolerate the Resistance's presence within the Furnace Layer, then pass a decree that barred the other Phyrexian factions from entering. This shrouds Urabrask and his forge in mystery, which is highlighted in his moniker and that of the Quiet Furnace. Though the 5 factions of New Phyrexia are united through Glistening Oil and through their belief in Phyresis, their methods of achieving perfection and their intentions differ greatly. They're united as Phyrexians, but it's the nature of progressive evolution to continually remold and grow anew. Factionalism drives each color against another, instills a sense of undermining aggression so that only the strongest faction remains to assume the mantle of father or mother of machines. To this end, each color brutally fights against and sabotages their neighbors to ultimately unite all of New Phyrexia under one banner. Recently, Elesh Norn has utilized diplomacy, subterfuge, and religious fanaticism to fuel her rise to power over the other factions. She's deftly crushed Urabrask's and Sheoldred's forces, manipulated Vorinclex and Jin Gitaxias into fulfilling her cause, and garnered the fealty of several Steel Thanes. With much of New Phyrexia under the Machine Orthodoxy's guidance, Norn has worked closely with Jin Gitaxias and the planeswalking artificer Tezzeret to develop a type of planar portal technology. Though not as powerful or as versatile as the portals of Phyrexia's past, Norn has sent Vorinclex and Jin Gitaxias on missions across the Blind Eternities to gather the knowledge she desires. While on Kaldheim, Vorinclex retrieved the sample of Tyrite, the mystical sap of the World Tree that grants not only the godlike powers used by the Scoti, but also allows them to travel between Kaldheim's realms. Though the purpose of Vorinclex's mission is up to speculation, Phyrexia's possession of Tyrite would further their research in planar portal technology and allow them to invade countless helpless planes. Meanwhile, Jin Gitaxias traveled to Kamigawa, the land of spirits, to conduct studies on the spirit realm, the nature of the soul, and the possibility of artificially replicating a planeswalker spark. Though Gitaxias' experiments were thwarted by the intervention of Kaito Shizuki and the Wandering Emperor, Jin and Tezzeret abscond with the captured Tamiyo. They bring her to the Core Augur's labs where Tamiyo is completed, becoming the first Phyrexianized planeswalker and giving the Phyrexians access to a planeswalker spark. Most recently, Urabrask traveled to New Capenna alongside Tezzeret in hopes of checking Elesh Norn's rise to power. The Red-Aligned Praetor sees visions of a powerful revolution that brings freedom sweep over New Phyrexia, and that the secret to defeating Norn lies within the substance Halo in the planeswalker Elspeth Tirel. Halo proved effective in combating the Phyrexians of old. Perhaps it might be used again to bring low the machine orthodoxy. Phyrexia, a name, a race, a religion, a way of life that has for millennia plagued Dominaria in the greater multiverse. Though Yawgmoth is truly dead and his beautiful paradise obliterated, a new Phyrexia has gained purchase and established a base from which to launch a corrupting crusade across the Blind Eternities. New Phyrexia and its Glistening Oil contagion are poised to infect countless worlds, spread the truth of brilliant perfection, and realize Yawgmoth's vision of completion. Who is powerful enough to oppose Elesh Norn, the new mother of machines, in her bid for dominion over the multiverse? Thank you so much for watching and listening to this video on Phyrexian completion. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on Phyrexia, whether you like its old or new form better, and what you predict will happen with Elesh Norn's conquest plans, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, consider subscribing to the channel or checking out the podcast where content is uploaded frequently. Again, a huge shout out to all of my Patreon supporters who make all of this possible. I couldn't do it without their spectacular patronage. If you're interested in becoming a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, written scripts, and early video drops, check out the link below or head to patreon.com/Lorebrarians to learn more. Special thanks to video editor Charlie Media. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.